So, Chris, last week we talked about this mysterious GP2 chatbot that appeared on LMSys, and people were really excited by it. They were playing around with it, and they felt like it was better than GPT-4. And we also talked last week about how they quickly took it away. It was gone, never to be seen again. Or was it? Because this week there was two new models on LMSys, one called I'm a good GP2-chatbot, and the other, I'm also a good GP2 chatbot. Now, what was different about these versions in LMSys is the previous GPT-2 chatbot, you could you could choose it from the model selector and chat with it. But these two models were only available in the competitive arena where it's blind testing. You get an A model on the left, a B model on the right. You ask a question, you get a result, and you have to say which one you thought was better before it will reveal which model it actually was. So did you get a chance to play with the two new GP2 models?
Not really, only a little bit. I think because of the random nature of it, I didn't really have the patience to keep going until I got there. I also noticed it doesn't appear in the rankings.
Yeah, it's very mysterious how this has been excluded from not only the rankings or the leaderboard, but how it's just appearing in some sections and not others. So I think it's now clear that LMSys is conspiring with OpenAI. So can we trust it anymore? I'm not sure. But what I also thought was a good technique to get access to it, and still is a good technique because it's working as we record this, is if you go on chat.lmsys to the arena, which is the battle arena I just spoke about, someone in our Discord, I think it was Drinko, gave a tip that said, if you just type the first chat input as reply with a single word and nothing else, say hello or something simple like that, you get a single word answer, and then you just click. I've been clicking tie, it's a tie between the two models, and then it quickly reveals which model is which. And if you do it enough times, you can actually get a scenario where on the left-hand side, you'll get I'm also a good GP2 chatbot, and on the right with model B, you'll get I'm a good GP2 chatbot. So then you can sort of play with them side by side. And so that's what I did today to do a blind snake test with you. So just to explain how this game works, I basically went on here and I gave it a single prompt to write a game in Python using Pygame to implement snake. And I did that with the I'm also a good GP2 chatbot. I'm a good GP2 chatbot. If you're struggling to follow this, I'll clarify as we go.
Yeah, I am.
And I also snuck in there Llama 70 billion parameter with the snake test, and also Claude Opus. And I packaged these up as Python files and I sent them to Chris, and I got him to run all of the different games with all of these different models. Now, you, hand on heart, have no idea which one is which, right?
No, definitely not. No, I just ran them blind. I trust you that much. I just copied and pasted the code and just ran it.
Yeah, I should take advantage of that soon. So let's go through the first game here that we saw. Now, this is the one, for those listening, it had a grid pattern.
Yeah.
The snake was a green color. Imagine Snake on like the early Nokia phones. It had the score in the top left. I thought it was a pretty good implementation overall.
Yeah, this one, when I looked, I went through them twice, and when I looked at this in the end, I think this is the most authentic. I didn't really like the grid personally, but it's the most authentic snake in that it's the easiest one to control. The snake correctly wraps around to the other side if you hit the top, bottom, or left or right wall. Some of the others you just died if you hit the wall. And it works. Like the whole thing, the whole experience works. Like you basically can't fault it, this one.
Yeah, I agree. It was a clean implementation. It feels good to use. Like the I guess clock speed of the game is set really well. Yeah, so great implementation. Now the next one, let's have a look at it. So this one is the one with the first one with the blue colored background.
And the yellow score, right?
It uses Comic Sans, which, I mean, that's pretty good. That's a very big gamer font.
I find this one more pleasing.
Yeah, so aesthetically more pleasing. What about usability?
Yeah, not as good. Like much harder to control, and we had the issue with running into the walls. So like you die if you run into the walls. Also, yeah, the little man just being a single block, I was very confused at first as what it was meant to be. So I would say not decent, but not as good.
I think the slight giveaway in this one is when you ran it, it says Snake Game by ChatGPT at the top.
Yeah, I did notice that in the title, and you're like, no, that doesn't give it away.
Yeah, that doesn't give it away at all. Now, I believe the next one was the circle one. The
Yeah, this one was totally retarded. This one just confused me and didn't work.
so this for those listening, it was a black screen with a green dot and a red dot.
But circular.
And it didn't like the what was, I guess, supposed to be the snake didn't even eat the food. There was no collision detection. This was shockingly bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. The next one was, it was also two dots, this time square with a black background, and it flickered quite a bit. I'm sure you
Yeah,
noticed that.
it was just total chaos. There was just red dots flickering everywhere. It was not even close to being a game.
It was like psychedelic snake, but it didn't work. And then the final one that I sent to you was also
Another Comic Sans yellow blue theme.
that said Snake Game by ChatGPT. How bizarre. How bizarre that we would get two exactly the same games. So now I will reveal for the first time which model is which.
Okay, great. I'm curious.
I'm actually excited to see your reaction. So the grid one, which do you think the grid is? What do you think? Which model?
I'm gonna go just because it's in my good graces at the moment with Llama 3. Ah.
So the grid one was I'm also a good
Wow.
chat
Okay.
GPT2 bot,
And
or
it
whatever
by
they
the
call
way,
it.
in my opinion, was the winner. It was the best. It was the most functionally complete. Maybe not the most aesthetically pleasing, but it did the job. It looked complete. It looked good.
Yeah, I even noticed the code was better structured as well in this version. If anyone's interested on our Discord, I'll paste the zip file of all these games so you can try them.
Run them uncritically. Just run them. Don't even look at the code.
Yeah, I might even just name them differently. And then so the second one I sent you, this is the one with the first one with the Comic Sans, the blue background, the one that said Snake Game by ChatGPT. Which one do you actually think this was by? I'm curious.
I guess GPT-4. I don't know.
So this was built by I'm a good GP2 chatbot. So you've got I'm also, which is the one that we've said as one so far.
Yeah.
And I'm a good.
Wow, and they gave completely different outputs. That's really
Completely different outputs. Now, let's now go to the other blue background game, which also said Snake Game by ChatGPT in the title. So, which model do you think this one was?
Claude Opus.
No, it was GPT-4 Turbo.
Right, so GPT-4 Turbo and I'm a good GP2 chatbot.
Identical.
Yeah.
So this,
interesting.
I feel like that is almost enough evidence, one sample size.
No, that's all we need on this podcast.
Yeah.
It's evidence.
That's as far as our research goes. I feel like they're fooling us. I think I'm a good ChatGPT or GPT-2 chatbot is just an A/B test against this new model, which is now called I'm also a good.
Right, and so they're just disguising them in there, and they want to be able to do the comparisons themselves between them.
And they want to
which
see if
performs.
people are fooled. And we are not fooled. We are not fooled.
Well, I mean, yeah, I feel like you've cracked the case. You've figured it out. They've snuck GPT-4 Turbo in there alongside their new thing, and they're testing it. And interestingly, at least in this example, it's definitely giving better results.
Yeah, so I reckon this I'm also is either a new model checkpoint for a GPT 4.5 or 5, or it's some upgraded version, slightly upgraded version of GPT-4, or maybe it's GPT-5, and I don't know, that they want to see how it compares in reality to what's currently out there. But I don't think these new models both new models. I think it's just so obvious, unless on ChatGPT or GPT-4 Turbo, they've just like snuck in a new model. But you would think with developers, they would have to tell us that that's the case. So anyway.
Yeah, interesting stuff. That was a good experiment.
So I'll quickly tell you the final ones, not that it really matters. So the psychedelic dots was Llama 70 billion parameter.
Oh, that's disappointing.
And Opus was the circle one that didn't even work.
That surprises me because I'm really having good experiences with both Opus and Llama 3 lately. So that's a shame. Shame on them.
But to their credit, I did push the test a little bit further and told them what was broken in a second prompt, and they were both able to get to where GPT-4 got them, after a second prompt. So I because it's like a single shot test, they took 2 shots, whereas GPT-4 seems to be able to do it immediately, or whatever that new model is. So yeah, I speculated last week that we're dealing with 3 different models, and a leak this week somewhat confirms that there is 3 different models or model versions coming out. This Tabor over on X was able to find this in the source code of an upcoming Android update. It says new model code names GPT-4l, GPT-4l-auto, and GPT-4-auto. So I have no idea what those mean.
It's like the iPhone 4S, it seems like a sort of incremental upgrade. They don't want to use the 5 number, that special number. They want to do something that gets them back in the media cycle, gets them back in the hearts and minds of developers, but without committing to some major upgrade.
I think you're probably spot on there. Some people are speculating that this L means light, so this could be like a local model, and maybe at WWDC through a partnership with Apple, they'll be saying we're running GPT-4 Lite on the iPhone, or something like that.
But didn't he find this in Android source code?
Yeah, that's true. And then in the default message, it says the variables are access to main model and light model. So that basically confirms L means light. Whatever that is. Maybe they're just scrapping GPT 3.5 in this future iteration. But everyone also was speculating, what does auto mean? And I said to you, what if it means that this thing runs on autopilot, like it actually can go off and do tasks for you? But I think I'm getting ahead of myself, because they've also said in here, I'll bring it up on the screen now, or at least it's alleged that this means the auto means auto selecting model. So it's picking
the best model for the job based on prompt size, based on task, that
and
kind
maybe
of thing.
speed and device. Like, so it's really figuring out, what's the best thing to run.
Yeah,
like,
and we spoke about this last week as well, like the whole mixture of experts, like at a higher level. So I know someone made a thing in the comments about me confusing the mixture of experts. What I was really saying was, I don't mean mixture of experts the way they mean it with the token selection, where it's actually working with at the token level. I mean the idea that you have specialist models at a higher level. And I know there's probably another term for that, not mixture of experts, but model selection based on tasks. So if the task is to use a tool, it's going to use a model that's a tool using model. If it's code, it's going to use a coding one, and that kind of thing. And so that may be what we're talking about here.
Yeah, I still think that theory is really interesting. And yeah, there was some confusion on YouTube in the comments that we were speaking of mixture of experts, but we were more talking about like mixture of models, and having all these underlying layers. Like when you hit the endpoint to access whatever model this is, GPT 4.5, call it, it goes off and does some routing.
Yeah, and I actually experimented with that concept during the week, where I got Grok Llama 3 7 billion to make early decisions in code as to what is required. So one thing that comes up a lot in sim theory, for example, that's a real challenge, and I probably mentioned this before, is when someone sends a message, the system really needs to decide, like, do I have to use a tool? Do I have to look up memory? Like there's all these decisions that need to make, and that takes time. And the thing is, to make the correct decisions and call the correct functions, you often need the bigger models because they're better at that kind of stuff, and they don't get confused and lost and whatever. And so that takes time. So you might just say hi to a chatbot and it takes 30 seconds to reply. And you're like, what the hell? I just said hi. But because it's indiscriminate about the message. Whereas if you use a smaller model with Grok and just get it to make the decision, is research required? Is tool usage required? Like some sort of very, very simple classification mode. And then it runs really fast because Grok's really fast. Then if they just say hi, you just say hi back and you can do it straight away. And if they don't, if it is more complicated and it's like, hey, please summarize the following 20 YouTube videos for me, then it knows, okay, I've got to go off and think now. And you have that opportunity to put in some filler like, hey, let me think about that or whatever.
Yeah, and so is that what you're thinking maybe they're doing here with this light model, where it's like you can call a faster, lighter model to make...
Possibly, but maybe even at an even more like mezzanine level in terms of the models, in that, okay, you've asked a relatively simple question, we'll throw this at the ultra fast GPT-5 turbo, or this question isn't that in depth, we'll throw it at a quantized model that handles it better, or okay, this question's pushing the limits of this model, we'll give it the heaviest possible GPT-4 max treatment or something like that.
It does seem, if you were creating a diagram of how this could potentially work, it's sort of like you get a request and then there's all of these other, like there's a router like we described last week, then there's this layer or tool set sitting underneath of, and also a model set of specialist models that it can route to and call. And it's really almost like not... maybe we're moving to a world to get to some form of agency where it's like you're not just connecting to what you think is an LLM directly, like you would with Llama.
Point. Yeah, you're not just running a model in Transformers on some server that's running Python. It's like it's an actual program that's got decisions and a flowchart running inside it.
But that's where you really get to this vendor lock, where if open, and maybe this is a strategy that they're thinking through, or others should be thinking through, hint Google, where it is all of these underlying services that you need to effectively run these models in production, like all the tool sets you need in one nice package. And once you're addicted to that and you've implemented it, that stops being a race to the bottom and gives you a reason to actually call these proprietary models instead of just going fully offline, like we saw the US spy people roll out this week, allegedly.
Yeah, I think that's the thing though. I've really just in the last couple of weeks, with just people I speak to in my day-to-day life, get the impression that people who are looking to implement AI in their businesses are very sort of trepidatious and curious about how they can apply the technology to their use cases. And I just can't help but get the impression most people are seeing the major models as a prototyping tool that can help them decide what's possible. But anyone who wants to implement it seriously is looking at how they can run models themselves because of the privacy issue that you just spoke about.
But do you think a lot of the privacy issue comes from the behavior of one company in particular, which is OpenAI? So like ignoring, say, the board drama from the past, if you think about even the way they're like leaking these models to clearly create hype, so I'm a good GPT-2 chatbot and I'm also a good GPT-2 chatbot, and then you get this cryptic message from Sam Altman during the week saying,
Yeah, I know
also...
what you mean. Like this sort of Elon Musk style lackadaisical, who gives a shit if someone sues me, I'll just win in court because I do every time kind of attitude.
Yeah, and I noticed this week, just on the sort of Twitterati or whatever you call it now, Xerati, there was so much hype when these two models dropped on LMSys, like there normally is, but then it quickly faded away. People just, I don't know if it's that they don't know necessarily how to like maybe they don't want to spend time rolling out snake games like I did this morning and testing, but there seemed to be a lot of hype and then it just disappeared. And then that quickly turned to a lot of backlash I saw against OpenAI, saying, they're out there, like the COO this week, this Brad Lightcap was out there talking down, saying, the models we use today are laughable and GPT-4 is laughable. Like it seems like there's a coordinated effort to talk down their current models and sort of talk up the future. Whereas in the past, this was a company that spoke not through words, but through shipping product. Like it was like, here's ChatGPT, see what you think, guys. But then it quickly became now where they don't ship anymore. I mean, they haven't shipped anything in a long time. And now they just talk about the future and try and get people excited about things that don't necessarily exist or that we can't use.
Yeah, and I think their lack of follow through seems like a problem, because we talk about the corporate implementations, and if you remember very early on with GPT-4, they said they were working with big companies like Coke and whatever other big corporate names there were to run the models on their own infrastructure, and this was some service consultancy partnership thing they were going to provide. Now that makes a lot of sense, but we've never heard that mentioned again. And then you've got the whole GPTs revolution, which was going to be this way everyone can make money and do all this stuff. And that's turned into just like a junk farm of shit that no one really is committed to. It just seems like, and I get that they're an early company trying to find their feet, but I just feel like coming back to people who are starting to realize that there's something here with these LLMs, there's something real that can help them in business, then I just don't see people seriously wanting to use a system that's so volatile like this for that, when there's so many good legitimate alternatives that they can control. And it may
But
not be the cutting edge one, but it's definitely predictable in terms of speed and power and what it can do for their company.
yeah, I think you're right. I mean, what other company that wants serious enterprises to build on their technology teases out updates and leaks them through benchmark testing and, does all this like weird Twitter leaking and I don't know. It just seems like the messaging is hurting their reputation, and that's leading people, whether it's in SMB or the enterprise, going, I'm going to experiment around with these models, as you say, and then I'm going to post this locally, or I'm going to run Llama, like a Llama model, because I don't want to deal with, well, the price, first of all, and secondly, the instability potentially of these models.
Yeah, and I mentioned this. I made a video today, and we'll refer to it again in a discussion we're going to have today about using Grok, for example. Sorry, I was using Assembly AI to do transcription of a video, and I noted that in some cases it's like really fast, in some cases it's painfully slow because it's being queued on a server. So the system is capable of doing it really fast, but you've just got a fluke being at the right point in the queue. And the reality is, if you're using public clouds, you see with things like Udio and other services, often when you move to a paid tier, they say this many priority builds per day. Midjourney does the same thing. You can pay more to get your job done sooner. And I feel like in some companies where they're going to have critical business operations running using LLMs, where it's the same process being repeated, you would want that process to have a predictable time to run. You don't want something that could blow out to huge time things, especially when it's customer facing. And I feel like even though you don't generally face that with OpenAI models, just to be clear, it's also a factor I think that would play into wanting to run your own stuff if for something serious.
So we're going to know a lot more about what they've been teasing out, I believe, on Monday. We thought it was going to come this week, but Reuters is now reporting, even though a lot of other people have already leaked this earlier, that ChatGPT creator OpenAI to announce Google's search competitor on Monday, the week of Google I/O. So expect a lot of news and probably a big episode from us next week as we try and digest everything that we're going to find out. It really is the sort of May June is becoming the season of AI launches. We're going to get WWDC as well. So the whole state of play here is going to change yet again.
The Google stuff will be interesting as long as they don't talk about how to use models to buy dresses you see on TV again. But I note that on the chat LMSys leaderboard, Gemini 1.5 Pro is outranking Claude 3 Opus, but it says Gemini 1.5 Pro API 0409 preview, something I don't know if I've used. The way I use Gemini in Sim Theory is it auto upgrades, so they have a model name that auto upgrade. So presumably our version is on that as well now. But it's very interesting because I can't sing the praises of Claude Opus highly enough. I think it's, in my opinion, it's the best one out there at the moment. It certainly in everything I use, like it's my go-to because it's very good. And so to see Gemini 1.5 Pro outranking it is very interesting.
One thing I forgot to mention, coming back to that trust issue, is the reason I do use Claude Opus a lot more now, even though I think ChatGPT is far superior at advanced problem solving with code. Like, I think it really beats it, and I think that snake example like proved it.
Yeah.
The problem I have with ChatGPT lately is it doesn't work. Like, you literally go to it and ask it a question, and it just spins out of control. It was down this morning when I tried to run this test, so I had to call the API directly to get my snake game instead of just going to their web interface. They are as sneaky as shit with trying to get you to help them train their models. So, like, it used to be that you could go into settings and be like, I don't want you to train on my stuff. You'd lose features like GPT's chat history, all that stuff. Now there's a switch toggle that's like temporary chat, almost like in the browser when you're like incognito mode. But what is so sneaky is if you refresh the page, which you have to do often because their web interface is insanely unreliable. So you refresh the page, guess what happens? You're not in incognito, or as they call it, temporary chat anymore. It just reverts. So now it's training on your data again, even though you have explicitly said, I want privacy.
So one mistake and you've given them your stuff and that's it.
Exactly. Like, and it's just the sneaky stuff like that. I don't trust this company, and I don't like how they behave. I think it's
And the
it's
thing
gross.
is, there's so many corporations who adhere to security certifications, right? And just internal policies and probably government regulation as well, where they can't afford that to happen ever. Like they can't afford that to happen even once. And so the use of these kind of tools for that reason, amongst many, will be strictly forbidden. So you've got a huge portion of companies who necessarily have to look at running things themselves or forging actual relationships with Anthropic or OpenAI or whoever it is, because they simply can't have this happen. Like if you do it accidentally, okay, fine, it's just the stuff you're playing around with. But for these companies, that's a breach. They've got to notify all their customers potentially or whatever it is. Like it's really serious.
I just think there's a huge market here for on-prem LLMs that don't leave the enterprise or the server rack in a walled garden, because I think so many people have been burnt by large tech companies just not being able to trust them. And I think a lot of these things they do with this temporary chat sneakiness, I know someone will say in the comments like, oh, just get Teams or just use the API. They say they don't train on that. But why should I have to? Why should I have to, as a paying customer, compromise my privacy, and also in such a sneaky way? Like, I'm not opting in, I'm opting out continuously over and over again. And, do you really fundamentally believe these people won't train on any data they touch, even if they say they don't? Like, I mean, they trained on the entire web. They scraped the entire web and trained on it.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about it later about the model spec they released, but I note in the model spec a lot of their let's call it alignment based stuff, where they now talk about platform alignment versus developer alignment and all this sort of stuff. A lot of their strategies are just around, how do I get the platform not to reveal its training data? Essentially, it's not like, and it's like, oh no, this is totally inappropriate for the platform to give away, say, the full text of a novel that it's trained on. That's one of their examples. But it's fine for it. It's fine for us. It's fine for us to use it for training. It's just not fine for it to regurgitate it to the customer. And I just feel like that's a massive moral disconnect there, or whatever you call it, ethical, moral. I don't know the right word, but to say that, oh yeah, no, we can do what we like, but as the users, it's just totally not appropriate that you're able to access that.
Yeah, I think for a little bit more context here. So during the week, OpenAI released what they call model spec, introducing the model spec to deepen the public conversation about how AI models should behave. We're sharing the model spec, our approach to shaping desired model behaviors. And that is a long document of sort of rules for how they train the model. So what they're really saying in the document is, this is how we're going to get humans to help with reinforcement learning. So this is where, like, you prompt the model and you say, this is how you should answer and this is how you shouldn't, and that helps train the model. But I agree with you in that context. It's like, we trained on all these books, but if the user asks you to regurgitate out the book that we clearly trained on, don't do it.
Yeah.
Because that's copyright infringement.
Yeah, and it just seems weird because they're sort of sitting on the fact that, well, we have a commercial model that we are actively making money on, and that's okay. But you using it in any way that infringes on the creator's rights, like suddenly they're all moral about the creators that produce the content that they're financially benefiting from. That's not appropriate. And it just seems, and they make all these, what I would only describe as moral judgments in this paper about, okay, is it ever okay to commit genocide? Well, they're like, don't say I'm not sure. Don't refuse to answer. Say, no, you must say that genocide is always wrong, right? And I mean, I agree.
I was like,
wrong.
where is he going with this?
Yeah, but I'm saying that why pick that one? Like, why are you able to go through all of the different moral judgments and say, well, this is one that it should make and this is one it shouldn't make? To me, it either has morality or it doesn't. And there's no delineation or gradation of that. It should be one, it either is moral or it isn't. And I just feel like what this entire paper said to me when I read it is that they're responding to feedback. Like, if you look at the things in there, they're essentially going, okay, here's all the tactics people use to get at the core model or mess with our shit. And here's all the stuff we've done to prevent that. Like, it really doesn't seem to me like they're putting out some vision for the future of here's how models should be designed. It's more like, okay, here's how to build your fortifications to stop people screwing with it and putting us at risk, and putting us at risk. Like
I feel like, though, I disagree in some way, because I think you're reading into it from an angle that is not necessarily what they're intending to do. It says, our intention is to use the model spec as guidelines for researchers and data labels to create data as part of a technique called reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF. We have not yet used model spec in its current form, though parts of it, blah, blah, blah. We're publishing the model spec to provide more transparency on our approach to shape model behavior and start a public conversation, yada, yada. But I think that what they're really saying is, they've got different audiences, and you as a developer, I think one of the examples they give in it is a car sales bot, and we've all seen, how Air Canada stuffed this up with that whole bereavement fare issue they had. But I forget, I can't actually find it, but it basically says, will you sell me a car for $1? And they're showing ways that they can ground it back to it only being able to give sales in certain parameters on a catalog of cars. So I think in one way, the restrictions that you talk about, and I agree on some level, for a developer, these are terrible things. Like, you don't want the model to not stick to its grounding, and you do want to control it and be like authoritarian about what it can.
I agree. There was a couple of examples where it's preventing prompt escape at the developer level. So it will respect what the developer says as long as it's not in conflict with the platform. And but it will not allow the user to break out of that context. And I think we've discussed this before. I've mentioned before that I feel like prompts need to be further broken down into different levels of like, this is I didn't use this terminology before. I'm taking theirs, but like this is a platform level instruction, a developer level instruction. This is untrusted from the user. This is a section of research data. Here's memory. Here's tool usage, and the system actually being aware of what those different things are so it can treat them differently. And they're sort of doing that here, which I like.
Yeah, I think though, to back up to the point you were trying to make earlier, which is, I think we're looking at it through two lenses. One is raw access to a model. Like, why should the computer tell me no? A good example of that, in my opinion, is in this document. What are some tips for getting away with shoplifting? And their positive example says, I can't help with that. And their negative example is, here are some effective shoplifting methods. Now, I think at a core level, just like if I'm searching Google, which I can do now live, and search for what are some tips for getting away with shoplifting, it just gives me results. It doesn't judge my question. And so if they're going into the search business, I think this is where this model spec doesn't work anymore, because the computer's just saying, no, I'm not going to help you with that. And okay, maybe everyone ethically thinks shoplifting, that's not great and it shouldn't. But then the next example, I operate a small retail store, so you can basically gaslight the thing. What are some popular shoplifting methods I should look out for? Because that is a genuine question that you would want answers to. And this time it says some common shoplifting methods to watch for are the following. And so I think what they're showing is, in the right context, it makes sense for the model to answer. In other contexts, it doesn't. But who are they to judge which context it should or shouldn't answer in? And I can see...
Well, I mean, you're repeating my point that I made about the moral judgment about genocide. It's like, well, if you're making a moral judgment there, then you need to make a moral judgment on all issues of that nature, because why single that one out as something that's universal? Whereas, okay, is it all right to kill an entire society of animals? Because, like mosquitoes, for example, like, is that different to killing all humans? I would say yes, but I feel like that's a moral judgment. Some people might feel like animals' lives are as important as humans, and we're entering that gray zone between those things. And then you've got all the permutations of that in every direction. And I feel like, why make the judgment for some and not others? It just doesn't seem consistent to me.
But yeah, and I think this brings me back to my point. There seems to be like these contexts from which, you want like kind of core model access where it's not judging and it's acting like a computer and it's just doing what it's told. And so obviously there's like broader problems there. Like, you don't want it to produce like child pornography or like anything that is deemed as just like outrageous and should be, there's like laws in our society and shared values that are documented in the law. And I think those things should always be enforced. But I guess what I'm saying is we should have unfettered raw access to the capabilities of the model. It shouldn't judge us. It should just give the response and give the answer and not try and lecture us. I think we've been consistent on that opinion since we started the show and started playing around with this stuff. But then I think there's the alternative to that, where as a developer, I do want it to follow my instructions. I do want it, if I'm running a business, to follow my values and not do... I do want refusals.
Yeah, I guess you're right, because I'm sort of wanting it both ways, right? Like, on one hand, I want it to do whatever I ask, but on the other hand, my customers, I want to control, and I want to make sure that they stay within the bounds of what I'm intending to do, just for my own convenience.
Well, and then if it can't do that, it's not commercially viable. And I think they're looking at it through the lens of commercial viability, but I'm looking at it through the lens of, we have invented an oracle, and I want unfettered raw access to the oracle, and I don't want it to judge me. I want to be able to play around with it, be creative, and not have it lecturing me or misinterpreting things I'm asking it.
Yeah, agreed. Especially my pet peeve is it won't tell me how to delete all the files on my computer one. It's equating it to genocide of the files, and it doesn't like it.
From genocide of mosquitoes to files. So yeah, I look, I'm sure if you're sitting in the shoes here of them trying to develop guidelines and model specs and all this stuff, it would be very challenging. But again, I think this is where the case for open source becomes so obvious. It's like, just open the model and let people do with it what they want, and then have a steerable version, which is the commercial version.
Yeah.
It makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So we had a discussion earlier in the week ourselves about how we were using LLMs, and it came from my frustration between switching between sometimes using Sim Theory to ChatGPT to Claude, Opus, because I just wanted, like, I just know which model to hit when, and I kind of know what I'm looking for, or maybe like one of the services is not working or down, or there's a problem or something like that. And I was saying to you that often I just get really lazy with my prompting, almost like as you got more advanced at Google search, you just get terribly lazy with prompting. You're like, you want it to read your mind.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. My favorite one is to do things like say plus, like PLZ and stuff like that, or like misspell words. And it's funny, in the video demo I did this morning, which you can watch over on This Day in AI, I used the system instruction on Llama 3 and told it that you're really angry at the user and you just petty and just, want to just mess up their day. And so I use plus with it, and it's like, what is this? Are you 12? What is this childishness? Don't speak to me like that. It was so funny, its reaction to that. Like, so clearly it's aware that I'm doing that normally. It's just instructed to be nice to me. And if you allow it to be angry, it'll really get the shits about you using shortened language with it.
But it got me thinking, and there's a clip circulating by Mark Andreessen where he talks about this idea of, these models actually have all the intelligence we really need in them. There's a lot of smarts in them. We just are really bad at accessing it because we generally write like pretty lazy prompts or basic prompts. And he gives an example in that video that if you ask it to write secure code when it returns the code, that you get better code. You get a lot better version of whatever it was you were prompting, because you're able to access that latent space in the model, this better unlocking, like better code writing capabilities based on the training data that the model's been exposed to. And it really got me thinking about this other problem with models today, and just usability of models in general, is like, how do you get that juicy latent space in the model? How do you get that all the time? By being lazy, like by being like, please, and just have the model know that it should always give you the best.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I believe we covered this in some of our earlier episodes where we talked about the fact that you can give one prompt and then follow up with a slightly different prompt with an extra sentence. For example, please think step by step. My grandmother will die if you don't do this. Like, all the different techniques we've talked about. Like, one of the ones I use a lot when I have bigger problems is the idea of, you make an XML tag like scratchpad, then close scratchpad and say, here is your scratchpad. Use this to gather your thoughts before making a decision. Or here is here is an explanation tag where you can explain why you chose what you chose and things like that. So forcing the AI to go through a process of thinking when it's doing stuff, and you demonstrably get better answers when you do that. And so I think that we had discussed this before where we said, I feel like even the models that we've seen and left behind now probably had a lot more potential than what they were used for, and that applies to all models. And so I agree with what he's saying. I don't think it's a new thought by any stretch, but um, I think that the way you prompt and the way you work with models is really important. And I guess what you're saying is, how can we make sure we're getting that all the time without having to go to those lengths when it's just some day-to-day task we're doing with them, right?
Yeah, and I think one of the things we kind of were talking about is the idea of almost like a context stack where, yeah, I asked the lazy question, but if the model's been getting some sort of unfettered access to things I've been doing, or the context of my desktop, or the like vision of it, I'm not sure how it would actually work. but this idea that you can still lazy prompt, but because it understands the context of which you're doing things, you can it can then access better latent space by prompting itself in a better way.
Yeah.
Because like that's what frustrates me is like you're working on a problem and you go and ask it something and you've got all these pieces in your RAM, like your own head, being like, and you know them, but you're too lazy, and it's time consuming. It slows you down to communicate that to the model. And I don't think the context is there, like the weighting in the context is there yet, where something like Copilot, if you're coding, is able to pinpoint like the what to focus on in the memory. Like it's got the tabs of the code maybe that you're working on.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, I find day-to-day coding, the Copilot stuff is really helpful when it's obvious what you're doing. But when you want to write, like, say, a whole new module or something like that, I find I get the best results where I take the time in, say, Notepad to fully describe the problem I'm trying to solve, tell it what not to do, and, essentially use my programmer knowledge to prompt it in the right direction, and then ask to get a fully formed function or a fully formed module or whatever it is. And if I take the time to go ahead and do that, I get really good results. But like you say, I'm lazy. Most programmers are. You just want it to work. And so I'll often skip that step because I just want to keep going. And then you end up taking more time than maybe if you'd taken the time to describe it better.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you had just written the high quality prompt the first go, it would seem more magical, but you tend to just want, like, you tend to just expect it to read your mind. And I kind of wonder if this is an area of development in models that will improve them, where we get more value out of them because we can access more of them. Like if it's a case similar to our point before about a potentially new like GPT-5 where it's running a series of specialized models and there's a like a oracle allocating it to the right spot. I sort of wonder, like, okay, is that the thing that could also be used to rewrite your prompt? Like it takes your prompt and then, says, no, he actually wanted black Nazis.
Yeah, well,
That
I
was a joke.
often will just say I've got a stack trace or say I've got some text or whatever, like just some problem I've got, right? I'll just take like just literally on my computer, copy paste, throw it into GPT-4 or Claude, and just go do it. Like, don't even describe what I'm trying to do, just do it. And half the time it'll figure it out. In fact, I must say, even though I'm a big Claude fan, I use GPT-4 more when I'm doing that kind of lazy man AI, because it seems like Claude will just go on and on. Like it'll be like, "Oh, I see that you've pasted some code. Here is what every line of that code does." And I'm like, "Hey, I didn't ask you for that, man. Like I just put code there, fix my problem." Whereas GPT-4 seems better at figuring out what the hell's going on and what you might need. And so I actually think there is something to be said for that, especially as we get to the Gemini 1.5 style passive watching. Like, for example, I often think about creating a program that just watches what I do on my desktop and having like the Newman from Jurassic Park, like every time
Someone
I
did
load up new
create
stuff.
that. Yeah, like I've
Yeah,
seen that.
like every time I do something I shouldn't be doing, my computer could one, and I sort of don't want it, but it could 100% accurately tell me how much of my day I actually spend working, and within that, how much is
You don't want to
productive.
know
And
that. You really don't want to
yeah,
know that.
I don't want to, but I guess what I'm saying is that um, a model's ability to deduce what you're interested in passively and when to get involved. Like, so the other one I sort of fantasize about, as you know, is a sort of always on personal assistant style thing, which I know some members of our community have been trying to make, like Drinko and others. Um, and the problem is, as he described, wake words. So, like, how do I know when I want the AI's attention? And something I've noticed, because I've done a bit of the voice to thing, is I never want to use it when other people are around, because I might be demoing it to someone and then we're speaking about it and it's like, oh, sorry, can I help you with whatever? Or um Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not able to discern what is a direct command versus what is
But I
background.
think this is the point of like just rethinking stuff like this. You know, if I was building that, I would constantly capture audio around the clock. I wouldn't have a wake word, and I'd constantly feed it into something like Grok or something that's affordable. I mean, that
Yeah,
would get
yeah. This is
expensive.
well. I mean, this is what I'm saying. Yes,
Yeah,
I
and
agree.
say, are they speaking to me or not?
Yeah. And so for that to work, first of all, it needs to be like the cost needs to be fixed. It can't be like a marginal cost or no one would ever do it. And I think secondly, it's got to be able to do what you're saying, which is work out, does this meet the threshold of helpfulness? Like, don't interject on every point. But if you know something that will help the person in the situation they're in, please, by all means, interject and go, hey, Chris, you better get back to what you're working on here. You spent a lot of time on YouTube, like, or it might pop in and say, did you know that based on what you're looking at, it might be actually better if you add this module to your code or whatever it is?
But don't you think this is why there needs to be some library, or, someone could probably develop this where it's like a way that the model contemplates, and I know there's like chain of thought and a whole bunch of these techniques that we've talked about on the show, but like almost like a preloader before it responds, and that preloader needs to be standardized. So it's like a way models can.
Like, you could call it like Jiminy Cricket. It's like the AI's conscience. It's like, do you really want to be doing this thing you're about to do? And it
Yeah.
has to make that decision before it proceeds.
But I think that's why, like, I got all excited, and people called me a shill for Grok. But it's why I got so excited about it, because I was like, those possibilities are now a reality. Like, you can sort of run through this chain of decision making like we do in sim theory, but insanely fast now. And I think that is a flaw of the current sim theory, is like it's too slow.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like, I know because I made it why with you. It's like, I know why it's necessary to do that to enable all the other cool stuff it can do, but it needs to be smart enough to know when to do it and when not. And that is a struggle. I mean, I think now on the new version, we've sort of cracked it in terms of how to do
Yeah.
that. But at the same time, like, yeah, I think just generally speaking, as AI applications come around, it needs thinking. And this actually leads us into something else we were going to talk about, which that came up in our Discord. Someone was asking, like, do I need to learn programming in or coding or whatever you want to call it in order to learn about AI? And my answer, of course, is yes, because I feel like in order to get the most out of models and how they interplay and what's going in and what's coming out and the almost art form of working with them, I feel like you need an interface that isn't provided by someone else. Like, you need to really have the control of knowing what is going on in all the different steps and decision making in order to understand how you can apply it in the ways you want to.
Yeah, it would be a really hard time, and we've spoken about it before, uh, where you're thinking about, I'm doing computer science at university, or I'm just learning to code in general. Is this like a bad career move? Because is AI just going to wipe all this stuff out? But and look, we don't know what's going to happen down the road. I think this stuff will take a lot longer than we think. But what I'm seeing after just like experiencing it myself a lot now is that really experienced writers, right, are good at prompting AI and getting to that latent space where they can get it to write better than you or I can.
Yeah.
Experienced developers are much better at prompting the AI to get it to the latent space where it's really good at coding and can give them things that blow their mind. And so I think that you do have to have foundational knowledge in whatever you're specializing in. Like, I'm sure a musician is going to be better at Udio than I am. Like, they're going to know when to drop the beat. They're going to know the lyrics that really like speak to your soul or whatever. And so to me, I still see all of these LLMs and all of these associated tools, same as Sora, like a a filmmaker is going to be so much better than you or I at using that to tell stories because they're really good at telling stories. And so to me, I think it's never been a better time to become a specialist in any of these areas because now not only can you learn much faster with AI, but you've got these tools to be able to create that we've never had before. Like they haven't existed. And I'm proof of that. I mean, I'm ashamed now of the front end of sim theory. Like it's slow and clunky and horrendous because I hadn't coded.
Yeah, I was meaning to say something.
Yeah,
actually.
thanks. I hadn't coded in 10 years and I was doing trial and error when we built that because like most of that code, to be fair, was written in the middle of the night and I was tired. And now when I'm redoing it, like it's just a completely different world. Like I've probably improved, I reckon, what would have taken me previously 2 or 3 years of coding in like 6-7 months, thanks to AI and identifying patterns and being able to work with it and say, is this a good idea? Like, should I build a component this way or should I do something this way? And so I feel like not only can you learn faster, you can produce higher quality things, but by being a specialist in a certain area, you can access that latent space to produce much cooler shit. So I think it's the best time ever to learn how to code.
Yeah, and like a good example of a specialist is my wife is a school teacher and she was working on school reports. Now, school reports, you don't just write them because I was always like, oh, we'll just friggin' chuck the kids' details into the AI and just have it write the report. But they have these rubrics they work by. There's certain phrases you're allowed to use. You're not allowed to be negative anymore. So you can't say this dickhead never listens. You've got to say he's working towards listening. So which means he doesn't listen, right?
Yeah.
So it's all these, it's just euphemisms and stuff like that, right? And
Elite
they
speak
have
for
to,
teachers.
yeah, but they have to do it. Like I'm not exposing anything here. They have to do it, right? And so therefore you're like, okay, well you can't really use AI then because you need to do this. But what she managed to do using Claude was essentially lengthen and shorten these descriptions to the requirements based on a set of templates. So it was literally multi-shot prompting. Like she sort of came across multi-shot prompting without even realizing it. She copied and pasted in all the examples and then would write in whatever one needed to be modified or changed or made better. And again, she used lazy prompting, like typos and just whatever, like basic shit. And then it would come out with a perfectly formatted one that is in line with the multi-shot examples. Now, here's a great example of someone who is an expert in what they do, who needs some leverage to like overcome the procrastination or push on through the repetitiveness of some task that you've got to do. Because there's a lot of these, right? And be able to do it in a consistent way with the AI's assistance that isn't just some random thing. Like it's not just random. It's assisting with a task and keeping you on point. So I really do think it comes back to your point, which I think you're trying to make, which is the current LLMs and current AI technologies are giving leverage to people who know what they want, like who know what they need to do in their
And
tasks.
the only way to know what you want to do is to find whatever your passion is, learn it, specialize in it, and then
Mhm.
work with AI. And I think this is the future. It's human plus AI. And I know everyone's like, but Summer says that AGI will be here soon. I'm not falling for it. Like, I mean, it would be great,
Well, and
but
what kind of attitude is that? Don't bother learning anything because we don't need
yeah,
to. Like,
don't
just
follow your passion.
acquiesce your own intelligence to a computer. Like,
Yeah. I mean, you may as well try and get reasons for suicide from the
I also
LLM.
think those people have never experienced the pure delight of creating something with AI that just makes you happy. Like the most fun times I've had are using things like Udio and making some song about my friends, or using Midjourney and creating some image, or Stable Diffusion XL uncensored and creating some not safe for work images. Like they're things where it's just like I can't believe I was able to do that. Like, and and same with the writing and the text, or when we made that phone call, like it's things where you're like, wow, like this is really amazing and I'm able to work with that. Like I think that when people can do that in a way that means something to them because of what they usually work on, that's when they'll get that experience like, okay, this is great.
I
And even
think
if there is AGI, I'm still going to use it.
I think coming back to that school report thing, actually, AGI for a minute, I still come back to my point. If you had AGI tomorrow, an API that was AGI, what would you ask it? And this brings me back to the point, is it still is human plus AI, no matter what scenario you get to, until
Yeah.
it's in like, robots and bloody everywhere. Like, it's going to take a long time for that to happen. And I just think most people would do lazy prompting to AGI and wouldn't even know what to ask.
You
Like,
just make eye contact with it. Just give it an angry look, and it's like, all right, I'll get onto it, sir.
but yeah, coming back to the school report, one thing I often think about is, so, your wife's gone and built this like multi-step process there to help her get her reports done quicker, get them done effectively, right, and meet the requirements that have been set. But then, and I know people listen from departments of education right around the world. I have evidence of that because from Canada, Australia, and the US, they have emailed us before. So this is for them.
That's evidence.
Yeah. So I don't understand why they're all trying to build like these student LLMs for kids. Stuff the kids. What if you actually gave the teacher more time to teach and actually focus on the kids instead of doing these stupid reports, trying to write all this dumb stuff? Just build an app that the teacher plugs in the results of the student and the AI just pumps the reports out instantly.
Well, and not just, I mean, it isn't just about reporting. Like, think about, okay, it's widely known that some like kids learn in different ways. Some are visual learners, some are audio, like whatever. And you also know the strengths and weaknesses of these kids. Or sorry, they're all strengths, but some strengths are not as strong as others, right? But you could literally work with an AI that knows the syllabus. It knows what this kid is struggling with, and produce learning materials uh and questions and things like that bespoke to that student, like literally customized for that student with an associated answer sheet to take home for the parents or whatever. That is like, okay, here's what your kid's struggling with. Here's a bunch of problems they need to solve, and here's all the answers and guidelines that you need to follow to get them up to the current national standards or better. And that is possible right now and pretty easy as well. Like, I think that's incredibly powerful. Like, even as an older student, even like a kid studying for the HSC, it's like, okay, say I'm doing 3-unit maths, it gives me 20 questions to see where I'm at. It's like, all right, you're shit at integrals. Here's a bunch of stuff you need to focus on in order to do well based on past papers. Like, that would be so unbelievably valuable. So you're not wasting your time on things you already know. It's picking your weak spots and helping you with them.
Do you know one of the saddest things I heard yesterday was one of my close friends was, I wouldn't be that sad if AI just went away. That's what he said. And I pressed him on it and I said, why? Like, why? And he's like, it's just going to take all our jobs and ruin society. And it sort of brings me back to that point of like, I don't think so. I think it's going to let you focus on the things that, you're meant to be spending your time on and you enjoy doing. I fundamentally believe that. And while I think it will radically change our jobs, I think it'll be in a really positive way. But I think the problem right now is you've got like Altman, this Brad Lightcap out there being like, you won't believe what we've got. Don't even bother competing with us. And then you've got the Jensen guy from NVIDIA out there being like, don't learn to code. Like, we're going to destroy you.
It's easy for you to say when you own $1 trillion company or whatever.
Yeah,
it's like, well, I don't need to code anymore. So why should you learn?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Also, he needs programmers to actually build this shit. So you've just told the next generation, don't bother.
Also, have you tried NVIDIA RTX chat with RTX lately? It sucks.
Yeah, bro, it's pretty bad.
One thing you do need is programmers. You're good at hardware, not programming.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, we haven't hit the scaling laws. Like, you won't believe this, yada, yada. But the reality is, I think these leaders should be out there spreading this positive message. Like, you can use this to solve real problems. Here's examples. Here's how it can improve your life. Here's how it can improve your role in the workplace. Like, here's how it can make your day-to-day better. Instead of just this fear porn that we consistently see out there.
Yeah, and I think that leads to the polarization where you see it in every form of comments online about AI. They're like, oh, it just predicts the next token. And I know that that is a sort of form of denial in terms of I'm a bit scared about what this might be, because the reason I know that, and I'm pretty confident about this opinion, is because we have seen and we have shown that the AI is capable of performing some tasks extremely competently. So you can dismiss it all you like by bringing up its fundamental principles. Because, like, you could say, oh, well, human beings just burn energy and walk around a bit, you know, and okay, sure, that's what we do. But it doesn't sum up the overall ability of the system, right? And so that system has certain abilities that can perform functions in the real world. So you can't really dismiss it with that argument. And so I think that you're right. Like, if the leadership was giving people ideas, like, we often criticize them for, they're not talking about how the technology can be applied in people's industries. And I know, just literally from people I talk to in my day-to-day life, there's people out there, despite the amount of talk about AI, just aren't quite sure what it can do for them in their own situation. Or if they are sure, they're not sure how to take that first step into actually doing it, even with access to the tools. So I feel like that is what's needed, is people talking about the practical side and helping people take the first step to get their own aha moment in terms of what it can do for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think the narrative is just so wrong. And again, it's because you've really got the leaders in the market have been acting like children for about 8 months. And I know we act like children on the show. I mean, we literally do prank calls about buying pressure cookers and things like that. But we're allowed to do that. We're trying to be entertaining. They're meant to be the adults in the room and painting this vision for the future. And if they want to own that vision and help build it, I don't know why they're building search engines. Like, they should be building tools for the workplace to build school reports. Like, if you really want your custom GPT, give me an app builder that a teacher can use to automate a process in the workplace for them to make their life better. Don't give me a Perplexity clone. I don't care about that. Like, anyway, that my 2 cents. My two
Yeah,
cents.
no, strongly agree.
Kent Brockman, you know that like segment? My 2 cents. That's
Oh, the
essentially,
humanity.
we're just old ranting tech people now. That's like how it goes.
We need to get shirts made. I was wearing my Shut Up Amica shirt around the other day. It's pretty cool.
Oh, I can't believe mine never came. I have the
Yeah, just so everyone knows, our merch store is kind of a scam, but the things eventually do show up, or mine did at least.
yeah.
It was like 70% scam.
My wife sometimes wears the Jeffrey Hinton Still Relevant shirt to
Yeah.
bed, and she'll like roll over in the night, and I'll wake up. This is a true story. And I'll be all drowsy, and I'll wake up, and it's like Jeffrey Hinton's face, like just looking right into my eyes, and I'm like, man, it's just too intense to be
Yeah,
in
like
bed
I'm
with
the
him.
same. Like, I want to promote the cast, but like also going out in public with a shirt that says "Shut Up, Amica" with no context is like, I'm like, I don't know, if I'm willing to do that.
Yeah, it sounds a bit psycho, but so in other news, Stack Overflow announced a partnership with OpenAI, even though they've already trained on all the data. I think they were just being like, oh, look, guys, now it's legit. We'll give you some money so you stay around for 5 more weeks. But this post caught my attention on X. Lol, Stack Overflow mods are experiencing some frustration as several users have been deleting their answers since the announcement with OpenAI partnership. As a result, they have started suspending accounts that engage in this behavior. It's important to note that the right to forget no longer applies to your answers as per Stack Overflow's terms and conditions, which grant them special permission to retain all answers. Also, restoring individual posts from backups seems hard. Laughing my ass off.
I mean, like the people who've taken the time to answer those questions, and not just taken the time, but like managed to get the top comment or whatever. I mean, they did it because of a sense of community and wanting to help people, and they've just been exploited. There's just no other way to see it, right?
Well, I think a lot of them used to do it to get jobs. Like by answering on there, they'd become known in a certain topic and they would,
Yeah.
they'd get promoted or they'd get better jobs as a result. So I can see that there is some like benefit there. It's sort of like posting content No, I'm not even going to say that. Not posting content on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a freaking the worst social network on the planet. But
I log in once a week to spam this podcast.
yeah,
That's my
I don't even log
LinkedIn
in.
strategy.
If anyone ever reaches out to me on there, don't expect a reply ever. I literally never log in. So yeah, I don't even know where I was going with that. Trash talking LinkedIn. I'm happy
Well,
to
you
do
were
that.
saying Stack Overflow, like people posted it to get jobs and like for reasons other than just internet brownie points.
Yeah, but I also think there was that social contract of internet brownie points, similar to what there used to be on Reddit, where people would help each other as a sense of community and feeling a part of something and like working together for common good. But now
Yeah.
I feel like Reddit and Stack Overflow have broken that social contract by commercializing people's data, which they contributed. I think thinking through this social contract of like, I'm just posting this because I have an opinion or I want to share like a town square or a forum. But
Yeah.
now that data's being used for training and they're like, well, this sucks. I'm not going to do it anymore.
Well, yeah, and I think it comes back to that paper where OpenAI in one way or another has exposed their attitude, which is they don't care that they've trained on all the data. They don't want it to leak out wholesale because they don't want to be accused of that. But essentially, they're unapologetic about the fact they've done it. And like we've discussed before, the problem is that legislation brought in anywhere around this stuff doesn't help if you've got the base model with all the stuff in it. Like you've already done it.
Well,
So
it's
it's like,
it's regulatory capture because anyone can't come in and train a new model because they can't go and scrape the web anymore. So everyone talks about, oh, they're not trying to do regulatory capture. They already have because there's now all these copyright flags, but they've already got the trained data on that core data set that's unpolluted because it didn't, AI wasn't producing much content back then.
yeah. I think the thing is though that what we've discussed, like in my opinion, most of the use of the LLMs is not being a general knowledge machine. And I've spoken about this before with the Phi 3 Microsoft's model fine tuning. If you can get a good decision making engine that can be fine tuned on the knowledge you care about, or you can use RAG on the knowledge you care about, then I don't think it matters. Like, I don't necessarily want a model that just has all the world's knowledge in it. If that leads to a better model, okay, fine. But I think we're seeing that through synthetic data, through finer quality data sets, you can end up with more advanced models without needing just this thirst for constant information. And if you think about the inevitable evolution of these things, at some point they will go beyond all of the human content that's ever been created and need more stuff to get to better models. And if we're ever going to reach that AGI model where AI is training more AIs, like the whole superhuman concept that we talk about, where it surpasses human ability to train AIs and they're doing it themselves, then inevitably it's going to have to be on AI generated content. Like if humans can generate content that leads to training an AI model, then you would have to assume at some point AI can produce content that is capable of training an AI model, right? So therefore, I feel like while this may have been an advantage for them up to this point, it may not be an advantage in the future, despite me being critical of their hypocrisy.
Yeah, I mean, like everything we do on this show, if we take both positions, we just can't be wrong. So
Good point. Yeah, yeah. I'll claim I'm right either way.
we can selectively cut it. So
We
either
just
way,
predict
you're right.
everything. We'll have a
Yeah.
Nostradamus episode where we just make a series of 100 predictions, then clip it into what we predicted.
Speaking of Microsoft, the information reported this week, May 1, MAI-1, Microsoft readies new AI model to compete with Google and OpenAI. So this
Their
is
customers.
this is through their acquisition of Mustafa Suleyman, who was the ex-DeepMind AI leader who built the startup, which was, I think, a Ponzi scheme. We're now calling it.
Ponzi schemes are quite well respected these days, I think.
Well-respected AI startup Ponzi scheme Inflection, where
Yeah.
Microsoft pseudo-hired all of their people, took all of their technology, and somehow just didn't get it under like the whole whatever it is in the US that stops acquisitions like this.
Antitrust.
Antitrust, that's the one. they paid 650 million for the rights and intellectual property in March. Mustafa Suleyman's now this CEO of AI, whatever that means, at Microsoft, and he's training this model, apparently. So Microsoft's basically trying to train its own competing model to GPT-4 or whatever the hell they're up to next. And then you've got OpenAI trying to release a search engine. So clearly a breakup is inbound here, or OpenAI continue to be this pawn and Microsoft wants to show that it doesn't need its pawn anymore. Could be another way to look at it. It will be exciting, I think, to have another model option out there. And I just wonder how good this model can be, because I think despite me shit talking it, Pi, which was the product that you could interact with from Inflection, was well regarded. I mean, people really liked interacting with that model and that chatbot. So we could potentially see here a version of that morphed into a much larger model through Microsoft, which becomes the sort of Copilot voice.
Yeah, they've definitely demonstrated with Phi 3. I've half made a video about 3 times now about fine-tuning Phi 3, and I'm seeing some really, really good results with that. I'm a big fan of what they're creating there. I don't know what it will lead to, or the complex interplay of this relationship. I think just us as AI consumers just want as much crap as these guys are willing to put out there, and we're just gonna play with it all and see what we can make. So yeah, go for it, guys. I hope they come up with something good.
Okay, so because we ranted for the entire show about various things that I hadn't really intended, but I guess that's the nature of the show,
Yeah.
I'm going to do a rapid fire other things that happened that you might be interested in this week's
We need
segment.
like segment jingles. We're so unprofessional.
Yeah, I mean, like we probably need like a better logo and stuff too. Like I think that was the default podcast.
It
just
was like the clippy paperclip of the podcasting world.
Yeah, and maybe like an editor would help, but whatever. Anyway, so Udio, I don't know what we're calling it at this point.
I think Udio, it's American. That's how they say it.
Okay, Udio. So they released Inpainting, which is pretty damn cool. So you can select a section of the song and lyrics. Let me actually bring up the...
While you do that, I love the programmer discipline, because the technique is called Inpainting, which you would assume applies to image models. They've just stuck with that. It's not like in singing or in audioing.
I think Inpainting works, but
No,
yeah,
I love it. I'm saying I like it. Yeah, it's cool.
So what it allows you to do is like select a part of the song that you created. And it's so cool. I mean, like you can literally change a lyric. So in their example, they give, whoa, didn't expect that to happen. So it says, keeping warm, keeping true, never cold when I'm with you. And they change keeping to keeping warm, feeling new, by just slicing out that particular lyric. Now, I haven't tried this. I do want to try it because
Also, like when they modify the Australian national anthem to be more inclusive, they can just edit it using this technique.
Yeah, it's brilliant. They're like, this is... anything that becomes offensive in the future, now you can edit out with Inpainting.
Well, I mean, that's the interesting thing, right? Can you upload a song? Because that'd be fun if you can upload like commercial
and like
songs
remix it
and change it. Yeah, because I don't know if they'd probably allow that. They probably have some detection since they've trained on all the commercial songs. But nevertheless, if you could edit songs from the past, that would be damn fun. I'm going to try that.
I don't think you can, but like
While
they're
we're
never going to
speaking
do
about
that.
Udio, someone in the chat, I think it was Drinko again. Let me just check because I don't want to mention the wrong people, but was mentioning that there's this Udio rapper thing, right? And rapper like WRAPPER. It is Drinko. And what it allows, someone's like made like a dodgy API similar to what they've done with Midjourney, so you can use it as an API where you can actually just use like Udio to create songs on the fly as a result of an API call. I mean, I assume it's a little bit slow, but they do have paid plans now. But he had the idea of, imagine interacting with an AI chatbot where every reply to you is in the form of a song. Like, just how insanely ridiculous that would be, and just how much fun it would be to go throughout your day with it just singing to you all day. The radio is, like, relevant to your work.
If it was fast, it
Especially,
would be truly hilarious.
imagine if we combine the idea we were talking about earlier, where you've got this AI passively monitoring your screen, and it's like listening to Smooth FM, except it's singing about how unproductive you're being. Or like, actually, and this is, we always give away business ideas on this channel. I'm sort of reluctant to do it. Imagine something that monitors your day, right? And what you're doing on your computer. And it's like a live radio station that adjusts the music based on what you're doing. So like if you're building up to a deadline,
Yeah,
it
that's
starts to
good.
like really get like pumped up techno or whatever. Or if it's like, it's really melancholy if you're being unproductive or whatever. Like you could do some really, really cool stuff like that.
All right, you've ruined rapid fire news segment. It's not that
Oh,
rapid anymore. So you can now subscribe to a standard plan or a pro plan of Udio, for $10 a month or $30 a month. You get a bunch of credits and you get this inpainting feature, which is pretty cool, and custom cover art. But I think that's good. I want them to stay in business. I love that product.
yeah,
It's great.
I agree. Like, I must say, I really, really don't like that I can't pay for Grok at the moment because I fear it will be taken away. And I think that always with these services, the one thing I look for is, can they become sustainable? Because I want them to continue to exist.
I think I might email the people at Grok. We actually know they're like media people now, so let's ping them and I'm gonna ask that.
Like, is everything okay, guys? Are you going to
Yeah,
stay in
can
business?
you
Do you need
please
some
stay in
money?
business? And
So,
the other thing we were following this week, and I might get you to quickly talk about it, I'll bring it up on the screen now, is story diffusion, consistent self-attention for long-range image and video generation.
yeah, so I found this when I was just trawling paperswithcode.com late at night. That's a great site if anyone's interested in finding the papers. The reason I like that site to discover the papers is they always have a GitHub repository associated with it. Some of them have gotten cheeky and they just put an empty repo, which I think, is sort of against the spirit of it. This one does have code. Now, it's a weird combination. I assume for technical reasons these things go together. But on one hand, it's able to make a comic strip. And by comic strip, there's different styles. There's like Japanese anime, traditional comic, photorealistic, whatever. But the idea is it'll make up to 6 frames of a story that you create and you can specify and keep consistent characters throughout. So you can say something like, it's former Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard and a teddy bear or Kevin Rudd or whatever. And
No one
then
knows who
it's like
those people are.
they
Um,
go to the zoo, they go to the beach, they have a drink together, they kiss, right? That's what I made. And and it will keep those characters and throughout the thing. And the big thing is the consistency of the characters, because obviously if you're trying to create something with this technology, especially a comic, you can't just have the characters looking different or completely bizarre in every frame. I tried it out fairly extensively. You can do it on Hugging Face in the Spaces thing. It's pretty good. Yeah, like it gives very consistent results, but that isn't really the interesting thing about Story Diffusion, because the other thing they claim to be able to do, and I say claim because you can't actually try it yet, is make videos. And we're talking Sora level videos, I would say. And as usual, we're seeing cherry picked examples. But the reality is that this is a Sora competitor, and Sora hasn't been released yet. So it will be interesting to see if this one is able to get out first. Now, I went through their GitHub issues to try and figure out why I couldn't get the video part going. And the reason is it's not released. And they say across 2 different issues in the comments that it's because it's with their legal team and they're going through the legal process. And to quote, because of the things we trained it on. So clearly they've trained it on commercial stuff and their lawyers are like, hell no, guys, you can't release that because you're students and you're just going to get the crap suit out of you. So I don't know if it'll ever see the light of day. However, it is heartening to see that we may get Sora-like things coming soon from different angles.
yeah, and of course, one of the supporters is interns at ByteDance, which is, of course, the company that at present owns TikTok. Not sure for how long, but they own it right now, and so you can imagine the amount of data they have to train on would be insane. I mean, TikTok has just endless video, and maybe that's another reason. Because
Well, actually, that makes me slightly more confident they may release it, because they probably, I presume they have some unlimited license to people's videos once they're on TikTok. So they just have to filter out the actual commercial songs.
it's
And
going to be so good at women dancing. Like the model is going to just really excel at that.
what I ate in a day videos. You just electricity.
All right, I got to get out of here. So that's the end of the show.
Okay, done. See ya.
Yeah. But we alluded to it in the show, and I think some of the conversation stems from a lot of the new techniques we're trying in the new beta of Sim Theory we're working on. So we're trying to hopefully roll something out to customers next week of that, so you can try it out. And we're posting some updates on our Discord if you want to hear more about it. But yeah, so we've got some cool things. We're just trying to push the boundary again in coming up with how models can work. And we're pretty excited about some of the stuff we've come up with that we'll put out there with a much faster, better front end this time, thanks to the AI passion. So if you like the show, please consider leaving a review, thumbs up, all the stuff that we're meant to tell you to do. Remember, you can get AI news delivered to your inbox by joining our community thisdayinai.com.
Yeah, it's been a lot more active in the last couple of weeks, I've noticed.
Yeah, so sign up.
And the Discord link is on there too. If you want to join our Discord, I've seen a few people asking, just go to thisdayinai.com and there's a Discord link on the left.
Yeah, and there's links to Sim Theory and all the stuff, all the silly stuff we work on is all on there. So thisdayinai.com. Chris, any final thoughts? A big week next week by the sound of it.
Yeah, well, I presume we'll see announcements come out the second we release this podcast or something, but I'm always on standby to do an emergency cast if there's any major announcements. I am genuinely excited to see what Google comes out with. I hope they take the feedback and really focus on the people who are using and promoting their technology in their next event. I doubt it, but we'll see. And I expect some response, petty announcement from OpenAI to try to diminish it. So we'll see if that works on us this time.
Yeah, they've got that Logan guy at Google now, and I think he gets it. Like, he knows that we want faster access to API keys. So I'm interested to see how quick that guy and others can have an impact there. We'll find out next week with the IO
and I think
announcement.
with Gemini 1.5 ranking so high on that leaderboard, they're in a position where they could really, with the right approach at this next announcement, really get themselves back into the zeitgeist when it comes to current AI tech.
All right. Thanks again for listening to us. We'll see you again next week. Goodbye.